Oi, Mask MOE, boosting token level learning via routing mask and mixture of experts. We do a lot of MOE papers in this channel. They can get like kind of meld together after a while. They get kind of boring sometimes. This one is not. Coolest part about this one is that not only does it have big performance improvements, but it is robust performance improvements, as in robust to different hyperparameters and things. And more importantly, it has a lot of room to grow. There are a lot of parts of this that were not at all tested, not at all tuned, and that more advanced methods could be very quickly tried, and I think would be very interesting, and at least conceptually to me, seem like they would do a lot, right? It fundamentally involves a mask and thinking about the rarity versus frequency of tokens and forcing them into different number of experts based off their rarity. But we should get to it. Before we do, like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTube things. Join the Discord server to discuss with other Tuna dorks. Support me on Patreon or on YouTube if you have the means to do so. If you support through YouTube, that join button down below, it is as low as $1 a month to support, and you get early access to my videos when they are uploaded as opposed to when they go live. Anyways, let's get to it. So whenever you get into dynamic routing, the idea of giving different experts different tokens in a way that is not fixed, you introduce the routing fluctuation problem, where basically as training progresses, the same tokens are assigned to different experts, right? Usually repeatedly, given maybe your router starts having a bias towards, oh, this token should go towards this expert or something. And consequently, each expert ends up being trained on only a subset of the same tokens, a subset of the total number of tokens that tends to be the same. And this lack of knowledge sharing and lack of interaction among experts might negatively impact the model's performance. Now, this has relatively less impact on the learning of frequent tokens, as these tokens have sufficient data to ensure that each expert receives adequate tuning. Presumably, a very frequent token like the is so frequent, and we have our extra routing loss to encourage roughly even use of experts, such that the token the, probably gets used by many different experts, right? However, when it comes to infrequent tokens, two things will either happen. Either a given rare token will always end up with the same expert, or that rare token will get dispersed across various experts, which can lead to underfitting for that token, that given rare token. If it only shows up very, very uncommonly in the data set, but it still gets routed to a bunch of different experts, it might be the case that none of those experts really saw enough of that token, had enough data points to become seriously well adapted to, intelligent to that token scenario. And this issue really hinders scaling up the number of experts in an MOE model. It means that as you get more and more experts, these rare tokens get uh, more evenly distributed across experts usually, unless they end up with a very, very quick, very, very hard rule from the router to stick to one expert, which is uncommon. More often they are distributed evenly. And then their data that is already rare gets split up very, very thinly across many, many experts as you have more and more experts. Furthermore, for those tokens that are frequent, they necessarily require encoding by more experts, given the fact that a frequent token is probably has a much broader range of use than a very rare token, right? These authors propose a new routing strategy called Mask MOE. Specifically, it's a masking method to adjust the number of visible experts for tokens of different frequencies in the dataset by generating a mask vector for each token in the vocabulary before training. So for every single token in the vocabulary, they check its frequency in the dataset and then create a mask that either masks more or less experts given based on the given token's frequency in the dataset. For infrequent tokens, this mask ends up such that only one visible expert corresponds to that token. The router only allows one single expert to go to that token, and that is a consistent same expert the entire time. There is no issue of routing in different experts. Whenever that token shows up, it will be routed there. Whereas for frequent tokens, the MOE layers have a lower routing masking rate, meaning they have more potential experts available to them. To display that right here, we have our normal MOE layer with a router rights, but here the router doesn't just allow for any tokens, The blue dots mean visible expert, as in the router is going to allow the token to go to that expert, and gray means masked expert, meaning there's just no chance that the token goes to that expert, right? Now, for some tokens like deliberate, they are rare enough that this mask only from the get-go, from the very first training iteration, allows for one single expert to match up to the word deliberate, right? Whereas for common tokens like in, right, from the get-go, most experts are actually available, and within the context of the ones that are available, regular routing with the whole evenness of routing loss is still going to happen. And what Mask MOE does is it allows the model to learn more intensively about infrequent tokens by routing the same infrequent tokens to the same expert. Thus, we don't have that problem of a rare token being split up across many experts and therefore not enough data. Now we are ensuring all of that rare token's data goes to the one expert, thus enabling the expert to be fully trained on those tokens. Meanwhile, it still allows for the diversity representations for frequent tokens by still having multiple experts available for routing. So frequent tokens often get used in many different ways, and thus we still allow multiple experts access to them to reflect all of the different ways that those frequent tokens might be more likely to be used. To be clear, this masking vector is determined before training and does not change during the training process. Once it's masked, it is masked, as well as during inference. And for multi-layer MOE models in these experiments, they reuse the same masking vector across different MOE layers. I'd be curious to see what kind of experiments can be done with that changing over time and going different across layers, but I digress. Now, to be clear, frequent tokens don't get access to every single expert. They also have reduced the total number of visible experts, but that number is far greater than what the infrequent tokens get, which is just one expert. As far as the load balancing loss, they use a pretty widely used one. There's no huge reason to change anything here because it's just a mask. It doesn't really affect too much. And this is good because load balancing is the hardest part of MOE, at least to my knowledge. And so the fact that we're using a already well tried and tested method is really nice. And so effectively, if you're an infrequent token, given that there's only one expert not being masked, that means that the load balancing loss effectively does not apply to them at all. And it primarily regulates the routing of those frequent tokens that do still get access to many, but not all of the experts. Additionally, to be clear, the way we actually set up this mask from with the infrequent tokens and the frequent ones is through hashing when we decide which specific ones of the experts get access to. So it's not like every single infrequent token gets the same expert. Every single infrequent token gets an expert. There might be a lot of overlap if there's far less experts than tokens, obviously, but we do not have just one expert being used for all infrequent tokens. We do end up, because this hash is effectively random but stable, we do end up with the load between experts as far as which ones are utilizing or messing with which infrequent token. That overall load doesn't end up being relatively balanced by default, given the hash. And so thanks to using that same load balancing loss and the fact that the hash itself is balanced, we do not actually see any decrease in training efficiency compared to regular sparse MOE. So for this pre-training token setup phase, they calculate the frequency of each token in the training set and sort them in descending order of frequency. Obviously, you don't have to use the entire training set. You can do a subset of it that is hopefully representative, obviously. Sort them in descending order of frequency, and they categorize the top tokens that cover P% of the data set as frequent tokens, and the remaining 1 minus P% as infrequent tokens, where P is a tunable hyperparameter. This is a very, very simple setup to designate frequent versus infrequent. Personally, I would love, love, love to see future work mess with not only different P's, but multiple brackets potentially of frequency in terms of a different bracket gets you a different number of experts, or just an actual continuum would be super nice. A single function that gives the most frequent token in the dataset access to all experts, and the least frequent token in the dataset access to one expert, and everything else as a range in between in there, which would end up still being like a step function effectively, but that would be more interesting to see, and also probably very difficult to tune though. Here they're doing P equal to 0.4, and for those frequent tokens, the number of experts that they get to see is set to 8, and for infrequent tokens, they get to see only one expert, of course. And so we have a total of 5 models to compare a traditional dense model, as you'd expect, the regular, pretty normal SMOE, sparse MOE, where the router is just a learnable parameter, a single linear layer that outputs logits in the same number of experts. And then they have a hash layer, which has been done before, is not common because it's not very good, I don't think, where through a random hash method, each token is assigned a fixed routing expert prior to training. So in this case, every single token, I believe, gets just one routing expert according to the hash. They also included, didn't need to include this, but it was a useful, interesting piece to include as it is getting more popular, Share MOE, which Share MOE has one shared expert, just one regular feed forward layer, feed forward MLP, and then 128 routed experts, where each expert is half times the size of a standard feed forward layer. The logic behind shared MOE, I've not done a paper on it actually, I've not done a video on it, but the logic behind it is just that a lot of tasks are probably redundant between experts. We should probably have some sharing. And this was used, to my knowledge, in there's a model or a company called Snowflake. I know they use this. I have not heard of others using this. I have heard of talk around it though, so I wouldn't be surprised if future MOE models this becomes pretty common. And the fact that they are each expert is half times the size of regular is just to account for the fact that we have this shared expert happening and we want an equal amount of inference compute compared with the other methods. Then we have our mask MOE, the one of interest here. They actually are going to also employ the shared expert architecture. So the shared expert piece is included here in mask MOE. But then of note is that we are in fact doing the whole hash, mask, more frequent, less frequent tokens, all that stuff for this one. Now, if we look at some initial perplexity results, right? These are just based off of model size, the dense base model obviously being the smallest, but it does have the same amount of actual inference compute happening roughly as the MOE models. Then the second grouping has one layer out of 24 model layers as an MOE layer. And then this final grouping has half of the layers out of 24 as MOE. But again, they should all have the same number of actual active parameters during inference. And we do in fact see that mask MOE has the lowest perplexity of all the models. Interestingly, the share MOE in the biggest model barely performs better than the hash layer, and in the smaller MOE model with just one layer MOE actually performs worse than both the sparse MOE and the hash layer MOE. Pretty interesting right there. It might just be that at this model size of 500,000 or 500,000,000 parameters, the model is not yet big enough to take advantage of share MOE. That's a pretty common thing you'll see, is a lot of trends in different architectures don't really start working until you hit that at least 500,000 parameters, if not a billion parameters. Here we look at actual benchmarks, not just perplexity, and we see in the case of models with one MOE layer, mask MOE performs either first or second across all benchmarks. And then in the 12 layers of MOE, mask MOE performs either first or second across all but one of the benchmarks. So very good performance here. Not quite first place all around, but getting either first or second in everything is still enough to convince me of its utility. So they did some ablation experiments on number of actual experts visible for frequent versus infrequent tokens. We're going to use the designation V sub B as the number of experts for visible for frequent tokens, as in not being masked for frequent tokens. Wait, sorry. V sub A is the number of experts visible for frequent tokens, and V sub B is the number of experts visible, aka not masked, for infrequent tokens. Notably, if V sub A, V sub B is 1, both of them are 1, then mask MOE actually reduces, becomes equivalent to the hash layer. And when V sub A and V sub B are both 64, mask MOE becomes equivalent to sparse MOE, right? And if we don't even separate out frequent versus infrequent tokens, if we just keep VA equal to VB and we compare against the sparse MOE baseline, then we see that concentrating tokens into fewer visible experts, such as 8 or 4, actually yields better outcomes. So even just looking at sparse MOE, we probably should not be letting every single token potentially use every single expert. We are getting loss in accuracy and performance based off of the data of tokens being too evenly distributed across the number of experts. Furthermore, when we compare VA equals 8 and VB equals 1 to VA and VB both equal 8, we do find that the 1, the actual forcing infrequent tokens all into one expert, does outperform just everything allowing to have 8 experts. This indicates that further reducing the number of visible experts is more beneficial for infrequent tokens, thus being the big proof of the hypothesis. And here's something interesting, that for mask MOE, whenever we have the number of experts visible by the rare tokens equal to 1, then regardless of our value for VA, the number of experts visible to the frequent tokens, the performance is better than sparse MOE and hash layer. So really, it doesn't even matter too much how many experts you give to the frequent tokens. Just forcing infrequent tokens into one single expert has good performance, robust performance gains. And now suddenly you just have to tune how many experts you want to give to the frequent tokens. Also, even without that shared expert, mask MOE still outperforms everything else across the average. And very interestingly, for SMOE and for share MOE, increasing the number of experts does not necessarily lead to lower perplexity. The scaling law of more experts are better is not super clear for either of those two baselines. And the hypothesis here is that this is because as you get more and more experts, the average number of tokens assigned to each expert decreases, leading to further underfitting. In contrast, the performance of either the hash model and the mask MOE consistently improve with the increase in number of experts, indicating they are more favorable for scaling number of experts. Now, this should be ringing some bells in your head if you've ever seen the mixture of a million experts paper, as they actually scale to many, many experts. That should mean that these two methods combined, mask MOE and that million expert version, might do very, very well together. I would love to see some future work that really dives into analyzing different MOE methods and comparing them. That'd be super interesting. And more importantly, combining them. Now, of course, big limitations here. I mentioned one earlier being the fact that we just have two categories of frequent versus infrequent tokens, and that it was kind of arbitrarily chosen, the actual ratio of the two. But more importantly, I'd like to point out that I personally was thinking about is not just categorizing into frequent and infrequent tokens, but for those infrequent ones, we're using a hash to designate which token goes to which expert, right? And the problem with the hash is it's taking in presumably either the letters of the token, the actual characters, or I would assume more likely it's taking in the token index, just the number, and it's outputting a random, totally random number for the index of the expert, right? This is odd because that means that two very similar tokens, such as the merge of a word and its version with a space ahead of it, like a space deliberate versus deliberate, could be assigned to, or would be randomly assigned to totally different experts. I do not like this. I would really like to see some thought put into how we assign or which experts we assign to which tokens. I'd love to see like related tokens, character wise, being grouped, the rare ones being grouped to the same expert. That'd be very interesting to me. I believe that, now to be fair, there could be the issue of the model now at that expert having to distinguish between all those very similar tokens and like figure out, all right, was there a space ahead of this one, or was it a capitalization of deliberate, or what was happening here? But depending on how it's done, I bet you can get some good outcomes. Maybe even semantic grouping. I'd love to see you start off with some BERT embeddings and group them, cluster them into different experts that way. It'd be very interesting. I don't know, a lot of routes to go in that regard. So cool paper. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the YouTube things. Join the Discord to discuss. Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And more importantly, if you are a big fan and you want to support me, you can do so with that YouTube join button down below. The lowest tier is only $1 per month. Highest is currently $10 a month. Waiting on our first $10 person. And if you do that, you will get early access to my videos. Alternatively, you can support through Patreon as well, or through Substack. Those do not get you early access to videos, but they're still pretty good for me either way. And all of those options will get you a special Discord role. But yeah, hope you all enjoyed today and a video.